With the college football playoff being a 12-team playoff system this year, does NC State really have a chance to make it in?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs are gone and sports have stopped sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com in order to get started. Happy Monday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, today is July the 29th. And what does that mean? We are 1 month exactly from kicking off the 2024 season. Thank goodness. I'm tired of getting on here and not talking about actual football. The days are dragging on. I can't wait to actually get this thing kicked off. But nonetheless, we have more to get to before the season does start. Let's talk college football playoff. I saw Greg McElroy, former quarterback of Alabama, now works for ESPN College Football. He put out an ACC tier list. There's 6 tiers categorizing all 17 teams in the conference. And today we're going to discuss what we think of where he placed everyone. So the 6 tiers, there's tier 1, national championship contenders. Tier 2 is playoff contenders. Tier 3 is Darkhorse playoff contenders. Tier 4 is spoilers. Tier 5 is bowl game bound. And Tier 6 is work in progress. Spoiler alert, his Tier 1 national championship contenders, he actually listed 0. There are no teams in the ACC that he believes can win the national championship this year. Kenton, do you agree?
I would say I disagree only because the teams at the top, if certain things shake out in their favor, you could absolutely see it happening. I mean, there's multiple factors outside of the things that you normally expect in terms of on the field things that could play into this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to name any names here, but there are certain teams where every time you look up, they're in the news for the wrong reason. There are other teams there are other teams that are set up in a way that they're so reliant on 1 or 2 players that if those 1 or 2 players go down, you're going to figure out a lot about that team afterwards. And so I wouldn't say that nobody's a national championship contender, but I understand the rationale because even in the ACC, if you have to say, hey, some things would have to break right for that to happen for you, I get saying, I don't want to include you in that.
I feel like if you're a playoff contender, then you should also be considered a national championship contender because really all you have to do is get in. And then after that occurs, anything can happen from there on out. But I was kind of surprised to see no one listed in Tier 1. However, it is very obvious that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be top heavy in probably, I'd say, like the first 8 teams of the college football playoff. Despite who wins the ACC, they'll probably be a 3 or a 4 seed. So I get it, but I still think if you're in the playoff, you should be considered to be able to win a national championship. Tier 2, these are the playoff contenders from Greg McElroy. He lists Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. Does NC State not being a playoff contender surprise you?
No, because national perception rarely ever matches up with reality. I don't understand Miami being constantly put in these conversations despite having never proved it, having never shown like, hey, we actually belong here. There's this belief that they're going to magically figure it out, that a head coach who couldn't figure out, hey, taking a knee when you can run the clock out is probably the best thing to do, and who had that exact thing happen to him before. I don't think Miami's problem is ever talent, but but other than that, I get Florida State and Clemson because that game has de facto decided the ACC champion, I believe, like 11 of the last 12 times or something like that, or 9 of the last 10.
I'm fully with you on Miami. There's never been a school that is so not back the way that Miami thinks that they are back every single year. And yes, they did a ton of work in the transfer portal. That part is undeniable. I have Cam Ward as the preseason player of the year. If you want to hear the rest of my preseason picks, we can drop that another time. But I think Cam Ward is a great quarterback. His athleticism is off the charts. And when you put enough pieces around him, I think he can really flourish. We're still going to have to see if Miami can put all the pieces together. But until that happens, I'm not putting them as a playoff contender because, again, they beat their chest. They say we're back every single year. It's the U, it's the smoke, and then they go 8-4. I'm tired of hearing all the buzz in the preseason for them to fall flat on their face when the time comes. I would not put Miami in a playoff contender. Florida State and Clemson, I get it. The only one I actually feel good about in this tier alone is Florida State. To be honest with you, I don't think I would have Clemson as a playoff contender. I think they fall in more to the Darkhorse category because I'm not sold on the Tigers being, I guess, revamped and dominant this year because they didn't do anything in the transfer portal. We'll see how that goes for them. Tier 3, this is where you'll find NC State. This is the Dark Horse playoff contenders. Greg McElroy has NC State and Louisville. How you feel about this one?
I think NC State absolutely belongs. Louisville, not so much. I would maybe throw Virginia Tech in there. If Virginia Tech can figure out a way to stop the run, they'd absolutely belong. But back to NC State for a second. Absolutely, in terms of Dark Horse, I think that they're on the upper end of this, or they would be on the lower end of tier 2.
Agreed.
Either way you cut it or slice it, because this is a team that's primed and ready. And my only hesitation about NC State, it's one thing and one thing only. Transfer quarterbacks in year 1, they're not their best selves. It generally takes 2 years to become your best selves. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, can Grayson McCall and company be good enough? Can they be good enough in year 1 to get them over, to get State over that hump? I think so, but would I say no so? I'm not so sure.
As it stands right now, I actually think this is the correct tier to place NC State into because I believe if they're going to make it into the CFP, they're more than likely going to have to go down to Clemson and beat the Tigers in Clemson. And until they can prove that, I think they're slated as a dark horse. There's nothing wrong with that. They just still have to prove that they can get over the hump. And then if they do, perhaps you will see them in the CFP. But I think tier 3 is probably correct for NC State. But like Kenton mentioned there, I would have them on the top half of tier 3. I mean, there's only 2 teams in the tier, but I would put them like fringe tier 2, but I do think they belong in tier 3. Louisville, that remains to be seen. I think they'll be a good team. They're not going to be as good as they were last year. So maybe 3, maybe 4, but nonetheless, Louisville and NC State are in the Dark Horse playoff contenders. Tier 4 are the spoilers. He has SMU, Virginia Tech, and the Dirty Foot Club. Any thoughts here?
I agree. Yeah. I agree. I think all 3 of those teams, or 2 of those teams are spoilers. I think Virginia Tech can sneak into that playoff range because their schedule is, if you think NC State's schedule is soft, woo-wee, go over there and look at that schedule in Blacksburg. I'll tell you, there's room for excitement. Now, those other 2, as I like to say, if you can't get invited to the party, what's the next best thing you can do? Drop a little something in the punch bowl. Okay. And that's what these 2 teams are going to be looking to do. I mean, SMU, I don't think that their role in this conference long term will be spoiler. However, to start off, I'm not sure if they can hold up in the trenches well enough to compete at ACC champ level. But I do think that they can compete well enough to pull off ACC upset level. I think they can do that. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that'll be tough for some teams to deal with.
Fully agree on Virginia Tech. If you have not seen their schedule, they might be the number 1 soft schedule merchant in the country this year. I think there's a legitimate chance the Hokies could be 10-2 without really playing much of anyone. I think their hardest game is Clemson, but that's at home at Lane Stadium. So Virginia Tech could have a very good season. And if nothing else, they could absolutely be a spoiler for a team like Clemson, or maybe even find themselves in CFP discussions. The Dirty Foot Club, being a spoiler is all they have to play for this year. I think they will make a bowl, but I don't think they'll do much more than that. So
you don't believe in Max Johnson? You don't believe, you ain't on the Max Johnson train? William and Max Will, if you will, little head coach QB combo.
Yeah, I'm all set. They're not going to have much more to play for than try and ruin a season, probably our season at the very end of the regular season there around Thanksgiving. So they're a team to keep an eye on. I wouldn't sleep on them, but I think they are devoid of very important talent at very important positions. Tier 5 is bowl game bound. They have Georgia Tech, Pitt, Syracuse, Cal, and Boston College. What do we have here?
I'm conflicted here. I'm conflicted on Boston College because I love Thomas Castellanos. I do not know how Bill O'Brien keeps getting these jobs. I am like the level of confusion within me that people look at Bill O'Brien's track record and say, that's a guy I want to lead my program. I don't get it. I don't understand it. More power to the man. I know that Boston College had to hire on short notice with their coach quitting and cutting out like after the coaching carousel had basically come to a stop. But Bill O'Brien is a choice. So I think that they belong in the work in progress territory. But I'll tell you what, I have seen Thomas Castellanos carry that team like Atlas to the world to a bowl game last year. So who knows? He may be able to do it again. Yeah, a little bit of concern there. But, I mean, for the most part, I think this tier is pretty right.
I feel like Bill O'Brien has a little bit of nepotism to him, not so much for his family, but because he's worked with both Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. That's why he keeps getting these jobs. But yeah, Boston College, I agree with you. I'm not sold. It feels like a rebuild up there in Chestnut Hill. Now, Georgia Tech being in this tier is interesting to me because me personally, I would slide them up into spoiler.
I'd slide them in spoiler.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech is going to be better than some folks may believe. I've seen some folks think that they can knock off Florida State out in Dublin, Ireland. I wouldn't exactly buy that, but I wouldn't doubt it's going to be a good game. I think Georgia Tech is going to be better than a lot of people believe. In fact, I think I even picked Georgia Tech to beat us in Week 11. They have that capability to sneak up on somebody. So Georgia Tech, I have my eye on this year. I would have slotted them up, but nonetheless, they're definitely going to make a bowl. Syracuse is an interesting team. Listening to them at ACC kickoff, Kyle McCord, I mean, he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback. They still have Aronde Gadsden, though, so perhaps make enough magic to have a decent season up in New York. And Cal, respectfully, they don't move the needle for me, but perhaps they make a bowl. Tier 6 is the work in progress tier. He names Virginia, Duke, Stanford, and Wake Forest. What are your thoughts to round us out?
Very, very correct. And notice, there's only one of those schools that's not a nerd school in there. Very unfortunate. Very.
All four nerd schools.
I'm not sure if UVA is. UVA wants to be a nerd school really bad, and it's like, but are you though? Like, are you really a nerd school? I don't know.
We've talked a good bit about NC State's schedule. 7 of their 12 games, their opponent lies within these bottom 3 tiers of the ACC. I mean, again, we really can't emphasize this more than we already have. You have to take advantage of a relatively weak schedule here in 24. These are the ACC tiers put together by ESPN college football analyst Greg McElroy. Tell us what you think in the comments about where all these teams are slotted in the tiers. If there's any you would change, any you would disagree with, let us know down in the comments. And coming up next, we're talking about the Alpha Wolf that took place over the weekend and a couple of players that were very disappointingly absent in Raleigh. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor of the day is Ibotta. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you can cash back on all of your purchases. This way you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies and even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 back per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or even a fancy dinner that you've been craving. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta and using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Ibotta on the Google Play or App Store, IBOTTA, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for more. Middle portion of our Monday show. Now time to talk about the Alpha Wolf Showcase that took place over the weekend. It's the final big high school recruiting event for NC State of the summer. They welcome in many of their 2025 signees, some of their 2026 prospects. It's a gigantic event to send the summer out with a bang before the season begins here in just a month. Now, last week we told you that number one overall quarterback in the 2026 class, Faison Brandon, was scheduled to attend. And also Jonte Gilbert, who's a high 4-star DB, was scheduled to attend. Turns out that neither of them ended up making the trip. I believe Faison Brandon ended up going to Knoxville to visit with the Volunteers again ahead of his commitment date. And then Jonte Gilbert, I believe he went to Georgia instead of the Wolfpack over the weekend. Kenton, how concerned are you that two of our top targets elected to go elsewhere?
I mean, concerned is not quite the word. I think that you accept, hey, these battles in recruiting may not be going your way. You live with that. You accept it. Cool. You keep recruiting them, all the same. But, you kind of accept where things are at, and you go from there, really. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I don't think that there should be, too much in terms of, hemming and hawing about, oh, my God, it's so upsetting that these guys aren't coming. Hey, it is what it is. You rock out with who you got, and whoever you don't got. And that's just part of the deal there. So, I look at this situation and I say to myself, it'd be great. It'd be wonderful. It'd be awesome and cool if these two were to sign with NC State. You have to live with the reality that may not be the case and keep going from there.
It definitely leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. When you have the number one quarterback in the country listing NC State in your Final Four, and he happens to be just down the road in Greensboro, you start to think, okay, could he really choose NC State? And then we get closer to the date. He's discussing how great his relationship is with the staff, and it makes you dream a little bit. And so to originally have him scheduled to come to this event instead of LSU or Alabama or even Tennessee, you get your hopes up just a little bit higher. And then I think to have the carpet kind of ripped out from under you, yeah, it's a little bit of a bitter feeling. Kind of like Kenton reiterated there, it's certainly not the end of the world. If there's anything we know about NC State's recruiting staff, they stay on players even despite them choosing to go elsewhere. Maybe it's for 1 year, maybe it's for 3 years, but the continued relationships have proven fruitful in getting guys to return to NC State. Noah Rogers, perfect example. Tamarcus Cooley, another example. Hollywood Smothers, another example. All very exciting players that have chosen to return to NC State and put their talents on the field with the Wolfpack. So despite Faison Brandon skipping over NC State, going to Tennessee, I would imagine that's probably a really good indication of his commitment that will come next weekend on August 3rd. Sounds like he's probably going to be a volunteer. I mean, at that point, it kind of is what it is. Maybe the continued relationship will turn his head later on down the road, but even if it isn't, you just got to keep it pushing if you're the Wolfpack. Continue flourishing with the prospects that you do have, develop new relationships down the road, and yeah, it does leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth, but yeah, like Kenton said, you just got to keep it moving.
There's an aspect of get back Tennessee may get the player, but you get to meet him at the 50-yard line and
That's right.
Talk some things out, if you will. You get to handle some conversations face to face in terms of, between Doran and Heupel and between Belton and Pierce and all these things. There's going to be some opportunities to change some minds and turn some heads in Bank of America Stadium week 2.
And Jonte Gilbert is the other high-name player that did not make the trip. He's a 4-star DB. I think he's out of the Atlanta area. Chose to go to Georgia over the weekend. I know Georgia's been on his recruitment as well. Gilbert being a home state player for the Bulldogs, perhaps they turn up the heat a little bit, but something I saw on one of the message boards that I do agree with, Jonte Gilbert kind of feels like a player that Georgia kind of wants. Maybe they could find some use for him. And NC State's like, yo, you could come here and be a star. Little battles like that is where NC State could continue to flourish. On that same topic, Jordan Young, who is one of the top safeties in the 2025 class, he's more or less down to Clemson and NC State. He did choose to attend the Alpha Wolf Showcase over the weekend. The staff is extremely excited about his presence there. Seemingly had a great time. He's built a great relationship with the staff up to this point. What are your thoughts on Jordan Young choosing to visit NC State over this weekend instead of Clemson?
That's a big deal. It's big time. It's big time the same way that you're like, hey, it hurts to not have Faison there and all that. It's great to have this young man there. But the other part of it is, again, there's still a score to settle. Even if you get him, even if you get your guy, you still have to reaffirm, hey, you're making the right decision. Look what we did when we met him at the 50-yard line, right? This is where you want to be. We're a team that's headed up and to the right. They're a team that's headed down and to the left. That's just not what you need.
A beautiful aspect of these highly intense recruiting battles these days, you also have to factor in the transfer portal. So, for example, sure, NC State misses on some of their top prospects. They could still fill that need with immediate eligibility and experience using the transfer portal. It stings a bit that you're not getting these players to come to the event, and perhaps they choose to not commit either. You could still address the voids that they would leave instantly. And NC State just did that this past offseason, and that is why we currently stand where we stand. So it certainly stings for them to seemingly turn their head elsewhere this close to their commitment date, but NC State's going to keep it rolling regardless. They're going to keep their heads down on the high school recruiting trails and certainly going to keep their eyes open in the transfer portal. NC State is going to be just fine moving forward.
And I'll say this, in terms of, moments where you feel like, man, I wish we had that guy, but it ain't going to be the worst thing in the world to not have him. I mean this very genuinely. At most, the next 4 to 5 years, the quarterback position is taken care of. At least the next 3.
Yeah.
The next 3-ish. I'm like, hey, we're good there. We're good. CJ Bailey has the goods. Will Wilson, I'm hearing, nothing but great things about. I am excited to see the quarterback battle between those two in the future because, again, I think both of them are spectacular. But I told everybody about CJ Bailey, hey, that kid's got it. He's there. Everybody thinks it's the receivers making him look good. Watch the film. He is hitting guys in stride. There's a difference between hitting a guy where it's like, oh, he's making all these spectacular catches and like, oh, man, these look like 2 pros. This guy's wide open and he's hitting them in stride. I'm telling you. So I think that both of those guys, it's going to be great to see in the future.
I still think the absolute world of Will Wilson. I think he is a certified dog. I think NC State fans are going to be pleasantly surprised once Will Wilson arrives on the scene in 2025. I think he's an absolute gem. I think he's a steal, and I think he's going to provide extremely talented quarterback play when the time comes. So, yeah, Faison Brandon certainly hurts a bit, but I think NC State is pretty safe at the quarterback position here in the near future. And rounding out our Monday show, a little bit of a fun discussion. Shout out to Jack Short on Twitter. Who is the best player of the Dave Doeren era so far? We discuss after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second sponsor of the day is Factor Meals. Warmer, sunnier days are calling, and you can fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes or so. No matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. With 35 different meals and now more than 60 add-ons to choose from, every week you'll have new flavors to explore. You can make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert and stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. You can enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well-balanced. So head on over to factormeals.com/lockedon50 and use code LOCKEDON50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off of your next month. That's code LOCKEDON50 at factormeals.com, 50% off your first box, plus 20% off of your next month while your subscription is active. factormeals.com. And our third sponsor of the day is FanDuel. Look, we all love sports, and we can't wait for them to return here in the fall. But until then, sports aren't sporting the way we want them to. That's where FanDuel comes in handy. FanDuel helps you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up any bets at any time you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Fun discussion to close out our Monday show. Shout out to Jack Short on Twitter. I saw his tweet asking who the best player of the Dave Doeren era is. He posted 4 pictures alongside of it. In no order, Jack listed Peyton Wilson, Devin Leary, Nyheim Hines, and Bradley Chubb on there to help generate discussion. I responded as quick as I possibly could. I think the answer is Peyton Wilson. Kenton, what say you?
Peyton Wilson is the obvious answer, but Coach Doeren's had some really, really special talents in his time here. I mean, obviously you could talk about Peyton, but then you got to go talk about his running mates, Drake Thomas and Isaiah Moore. What a special group they were. That was a linebacking trio that, that was like something that we'd never seen virtually. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball and what a special group of guys you have there in terms of the receiving record books being littered with these guys in terms of Emeka Emezi, who's, I believe, our all-time receptions leader. You got Thayer Thomas, who I believe has more touchdowns than Emeka Emezi. And then, of course, the ultimate touchdown maker. Is he a running back? Is he a receiver? Is he an H-back? Is he a tight end? He's all of it and more. He's Jay Sam, ladies and gentlemen. There's so many very special guys. And I want to make sure that we capture a few guys as part of Doeren's legacy who were older guys who were young guys when he got here, but we watched him mature in front of our eyes in terms of guys like Mike Rose or Art Norman, who finished out very high in the all-time sack leadership. Speaking of sacks, you got Bradley Chubb in there as well. The list really goes on and on and on in terms of players who had stellar careers under Doeren. You also had guys who had stellar years and like unmatched years in NC State history with the likes of a Devin Leary or Reggie Gillespie. Again, there's lots of great players that you could name here that did amazing things in the red and white of NC State. And I think Peyton is on a pantheon by itself in terms of players in Doeren's time. But that's not to say that there were not other great players along the way. That's just to say that he is the greatest. I think that he was robbed of multiple awards, all by Notre Dame guys, might I add, which is kind of odd. The ACC Player of the Year and the Defensive Player of the Year in the COVID year, which went to JOK, which he beat JOK in literally every single statistical category, I believe, that year. I want to say almost every except one or two defensively. And the one or two that he lost in wasn't tackles or assisted tackles. And, losing to Rocket Watts last year in terms, I believe it was the Lombardi or the Nagurski, one of those two that he didn't get because of him. But, all in all, Peyton's the guy. He is – I tell people all the time when folks ask, well, how good is Thunder? Look at Peyton Wilson, because that is the guy that I say he took a Maserati and said, hey, we're going to supercharge this thing even faster than what it normally goes. And we saw what we got with Peyton.
Yeah, I think Peyton Wilson is far and away the best player that has played under Dave Doeren since his tenure began in 2013. He's certainly arguably the most decorated. Kenton mentioned he did have a couple awards stolen away from him, but Peyton Wilson just feels like the program-defining player under Coach Doeren. I don't think there's a player that's had the most impact in terms of the program, defining culture, just being a freak of nature on the field. The only other player that really comes to mind in that type of language would be Bradley Chubb. And still, I think Bradley Chubb is a little bit of a distant second place behind Peyton Wilson. Bradley Chubb had an incredible career. He's now the sack leader at NC State. He won the Nagurski Award in his final year with the Wolfpack. His number is up on the facade in Carter Finley. I certainly think that Peyton Wilson's should be in a very short amount of time. I would have done it as soon as the season ended last year. I think there's really nothing to debate as far as that goes, but those two feel like a distant top two, with Peyton being a distant top one. But there are a lot of other players that you could consider. The Jay Sam was one of my favorite all time. His versatility is really not something you see all the time at the college football level. Nyheim Hines was a blur, whether it was punt return, whether it was in the backfield, or even lining up as a wide receiver. He was going to be electric anytime he's on the field. Ryan Finley, I don't think Ryan Finley gets enough love for his time at NC State. You could argue that Ryan Finley, one of the reasons this program has elevated in the fashion that it has. I know Devin Leary was mentioned. We'll never forget Devin Leary's 2021 season. Certainly wish he could have been healthy for his entire time here, because who knows what he would have looked like if that were the case. Emeka Emezi is an all-time great. Thayer Thomas is an all-time great. Drake Thomas and Isaiah Moore, like Kenton mentioned, incredible linebackers. There's so many players to be discussed here. But I think at the end of the day, it is Peyton Wilson, and then it's everyone else.
Yeah.
His number needs to be up immediately. I don't think anyone should ever wear the number 11 again. Sorry, Juice Farine. I think you got to change your number, brother. I think you got to give it up. I don't think there should be another 11 ever to wear the NC State red and white, because he has been that special of a player during his time here. Let us know who you think. If you think it's not Peyton Wilson, or if you think it is Peyton Wilson, anyone else you have on your mind, throw it down in the comment box. That'll do it for us here on Monday. It's going to be a very busy week for us. We're going to have multiple episodes on both Tuesday and Wednesday. Be sure to keep an eye out for that. Hit that like button, drop a comment in the comment box, and mash that subscribe button if you have not already. We are 1 month away from kicking this thing off in 2024. Help us help you get through the remaining days of August so we can get this thing going. We will see you all tomorrow, and until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.